Amid the crowded, indifferent streets, a homeless man quietly picked up a wallet that had fallen at the curb. He could have kept it, no one would know. No one would blame him. Yet his choice to return it set off a chain of events no one could have foreseen changing his life and the lives of those around him. Daniel Price woke up to the rasp of traffic rolling over the elevated highway that sheltered his makeshift bed, the sound humming in his chest like a distant engine he no longer had the keys to. Cardboard flattened beneath his stale sleeping bag, and when he sat up the cool April air slipped under his coat, reinvigorating the ache in his left shoulder, a broken bone that had never set right after he'd fallen while unloading warehouse crates 2 years earlier, back when he still had a job, an apartment, and the belief that tomorrow might look better than today. Now he measured time by the slow change of billboard advertisements and the shifting flavor of soup at the Shelter Tomato on Monday, minestrone on Thursday markers that told him seasons kept passing, even if he felt stuck in one long gray afternoon. At 46, Daniel's face carried the weathered evidence of missed chances, crow's 1 feet etched by years of squinting in unfiltered sunlight, and a beard threaded equally with charcoal and frost. He pulled on his scuffed boots, patting the pocket in his coat where 6 crumpled singles and a subway token resided his entire net worth, and climbed the embankment toward the city park. Mornings were safest there. The grounds crew didn't start until 9, and dog walkers tended to offer an apologetic smile rather than the suspicion that followed him everywhere else. He rinsed at the drinking fountain, ran fingers through his hair until it lay in a semblance of order, and decided that if he hurried, he could still reach the soup kitchen before the line snaked around the block. Across the city, Julia Hahn stood in front of her floor-within-ceiling bathroom mirror, smoothing the lapels of a charcoal blazer that matched the umbrellas of clouds gathering outside. At 29.9, she was the youngest senior analyst at Hightower Investment Group, a detail that thrilled her parents yet hollowed her gut whenever she caught her own reflection in boardroom glass. The thin platinum watch on her wrist felt like handcuffs, ticking off the hours she spent chasing deals that fattened a portfolio but left her personal life emaciated. She had left her West Village apartment early, convinced the looming quarterly review required an extra hour at her desk, unaware that this particular Tuesday would reroute the trajectory of her neatly plotted career plan. The collision course began with nothing more dramatic than a distracted moment. Julia exited the 17th Street subway station, phone pressed to her ear while she reassured a nervous junior associate that the spreadsheets would balance before the noon call. She shifted her tote bag, reached for her wallet to tap out at the turnstile, and then tucked it hastily into the outer pocket where it balanced precariously atop a knit scarf. Between the gusting wind and the jostle of commuters, the wallet teetered, slipped, and landed unnoticed near a trash bin on the plaza's edge. Julia continued up the concrete steps, eyes already on the amber glow of the office tower across the avenue, unaware that every credential to her existence, driver's license, company ID card, credit cards, and a folded photo of her late mother was now vulnerable on the ground. Daniel arrived not for charity but for a washroom. The park's restrooms were closed for maintenance, and experience taught him that the subway station's facilities stayed unlocked until the first wave of commuters cleared. He ducked inside, then emerged a few minutes later, marginally cleaner, and accompanied by the hollow roll in his stomach that reminded him it had been 23 hours since his last real meal. As he trudged toward the stairs, his boot brushed a rectangular object, the color of wet sand. Instinct told him to keep walking anything. Valuable left unattended in this city was either bait or belonged to someone powerful enough to punish whoever touched it, but curiosity outweighed caution. He knelt, flipping the wallet open. Crisp $20 or $50 bills formed a neat fan inside. Judging by the thickness, at least $800 enough cash to buy 2 weeks of motel nights, hot showers, and dignified breakfasts. His fingers tingled at the thought of warmth that didn't come from burnt coffee, of a mattress with springs instead of cardboard, of the simple luxury of closing a door that locked from the inside. Outside, a city bus exhaled diesel exhaust, and somewhere in Daniel's memory echoed his father's voice-of, but unwavering reciting the rule he'd lived by. "Integrity is what you do when no one's watching, son." Trembling slightly, Daniel sifted through the other contents. A driver's license photo showed a young Asian-American woman with a determined mouth and eyes that looked both tired and fierce. Julia's address was a 10-minute walk from Daniel's bridge. There was also a violet-tinted employee badge clipped behind the leather, stamped with Hightower Investment Group. Suddenly the cash felt less like salvation and more like a test stone he wasn't sure he could pass this time. Years on the streets had chipped away at abstract virtues, replacing them with concrete calculations. Food versus hunger, shelter versus hypothermia. Still, the memory of his father persisted, stubborn as sap. Daniel exhaled and stowed the wallet deep within his coat, sealing his decision before he could talk himself out of it. Julia discovered her loss at 8:17 a.m. when she reached the building lobby. The security guard, accustomed to her efficiency, frowned as she rummaged through her tote bag, the color draining from her cheeks. She retraced her route in her mind like a forensic accountant turnstile, escalator, crosswalk, but reality congealed in the absence of leather under her fingers. Minutes later, after canceling her credit cards and signing a temporary entrance form, she sat at her workstation, brain buzzing louder than the fluorescent lights. Worst of all was the photo of her mother, folded small enough to slip beside her insurance card. Her mother's last words, "Success without kindness is failure in disguise," suddenly rang louder than any stock projection. Meanwhile, Daniel navigated the city's steel arteries, rehearsing how he might return the wallet without looking like the threat so many assumed him to be. He imagined dropping it at a police precinct, but dismissed the idea. The station would ask questions, maybe use words like stolen, and he didn't have resources for legal tangles. Better to deliver it directly. He hunched inside his coat, noting the contrast between polished storefronts and his reflection layers of grime, beard growth a week overdue, and a posture sculpted by years of making himself smaller. It was past 10 when Daniel arrived at the lobby of the Hightower building, a glass monolith gleaming like a shard of sky. Security scanned him from boots to beanie, eyes lingering on the frayed cuffs of his coat. "Can I help you?" the guard asked, tone straddling the line between professional and wary. Daniel cleared his throat, pulled the wallet from his pocket as though it were evidence, and managed, "I found this. Belongs to someone who works here. Julia Hahn." The guard pressed a button behind the desk. Another uniformed officer joined them. Daniel sensed the unspoken suspicion. A homeless man returning a wallet meant there was an angle, a scam, a threat. He considered bolting. Instead, he stood his ground, gaze steady though his hands trembled. Upstairs, Julia's phone buzzed. When she heard the guard's explanation, her chair screeched backward. She descended in an express elevator that seemed too slow for her pounding heart, rehearsing gratitude speeches and bracing for disappointment. What if her mother's photo was gone? When the doors parted, she saw Daniela's silhouette out of place amid marble floors. Their eyes met, hers filling with relief, his guarded but calm. The guard handed her the wallet, and she opened it on the spot. Everything was still there, cash included. Emotion gathered in her throat like a rising tide. "Thank you," she said, stepping toward him. "You have no idea what this means to me." Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable under the fluorescent halo. "No reward necessary," he muttered, already retreating. Julia reached into the wallet, unfolding some bills. "Please, at least let me buy you lunch." He shook his head. "I'm fine." Julia noticed the threadbare gloves, the bruised knuckles, the slight limp in his left leg. Fine was a fragile mask. "Then allow me to return the kindness somehow," she insisted, voice softer. "I won't feel right otherwise." Daniel's instinct screamed to decline kindness, often arrived with hidden strings, but fatigue and hunger nipped his resolve. He nodded once. Julia signed him through security and guided him to a cafe 2 blocks away, choosing a corner booth where sunlight warmed the table's cedar grain. She ordered 2 sandwiches, steaming bowls of lentil soup, and coffee that smelled like Ethiopia's sunrise. As Daniel ate, his shoulders softened, and they talked. He mentioned warehouse work, losing his job, the spiral of medical bills, eviction. Julia shared late nights at the office, the pressure to outperform, the lonely condo echoing with silence her mother used to fill. Their stories overlapped in unexpected ways, both children of single parents who taught them perseverance, both haunted by the sense that they should be doing more with their time on earth. When Daniel described the nights he spent by the river, watching ferries glide like lit-up ghosts, Julia's eyes glistened. She remembered strolling those same docks with her mother, who would quote poetry about hope riding on waves. Strange how two lives could occupy the same city yet remain invisible to each other until Fateor, a lost wallet, tilted the lens. Over the next week, they met 3 more times, initially at Julia's insistence. She delivered a new coat she'd picked out, black wool with sturdy seams. Daniel accepted reluctantly, promising to repay her when things turned around. Julia countered by suggesting volunteer opportunities at the downtown meal center, her firm sponsored once a month. "You'd be helping me," she argued when he hesitated. "We need extra hands, and you know better than anyone what folks there are going through." Daniel agreed. Though skepticism slithered inside him, people rarely meant what they said after the glow of gratitude faded. On Saturday, he arrived at Riverside Community Kitchen to find Julia already ladling chili, sleeves rolled over slender forearms. The director, a jovial woman named Marisol, welcomed him with surprising warmth and set him to slicing bread. The rhythm of the kitchen soothed him, steam rising like morning mist, metal clanging, volunteers weaving around one another in practiced choreography. Daniel worked the shift, noticing how Julia listened intently to each guest, meeting them at eye level rather than from a pedestal. By day's end, he felt a lightness he hadn't known in years, as though someone had unhooked the invisible anchors from his chest. Marisol pulled him aside. "Presence," she said. "We need a part-time outreach coordinator, someone to connect with folks on the street, steer them here or to shelters. Comes with a stipend. Interested?" The offer stunned Daniel. He glanced toward Julia, who pretended not to listen but smiled into her apron. Pride prickled. He opened his mouth to decline, fearing failure. Then he remembered the cardboard bed under the bridge and the countless faces he passed nightly, mirrors of his own despair. "Yes," he whispered, voice thick. "I'd be honored." For the first time in years, Daniel kept a schedule. He reported to the kitchen 3 afternoons a week, mapping encampments, distributing flyers, and escorting newcomers to dinner. Each small victory convincing a skeptical veteran to try Marisol's soup, guiding a pregnant teen to a women's shelter mended a stitch in the fabric of his self-worth. Julia, meanwhile, discovered that leaving her desk for volunteer hours didn't derail her performance. It invigorated her. She began questioning the all-eye-consuming culture at Hightower, drafting proposals for social impact investments. Their friendship deepened like river water under rain. Yet not all change flows smoothly. One evening, Daniel stood before the mirror in the shelter's bathroom and saw a man worth saving. The revelation frightened him. Hope, once crushed, can feel dangerous to entertain. Later, on his usual outreach patrol, he crossed paths with Rick Hawk Dawson, an unpredictable figure who trafficked in stolen goods and rumors. Hawk eyed Daniel's new coat and sneered, "Fancy. Who's funding your upgrade?" Daniel shrugged. "A friend." Hawk's laughter was a rusted hinge. "Friends with suits? Careful, they'll tire of charity soon." Hawk's words lodged like splinters, reviving Daniel's old distrust. A week later, Daniel missed his scheduled shift. Julia called shelters, hospitals, even the police, her mind conjuring worst-case scenarios. She found him at Mercy General, checked in under John Doe, with pneumonia and dehydration. He had been found collapsed near the pier during a cold snap. Julia entered the dim hospital room to see him frail, cheeks hollow, eyes closed against fluorescent glare. Machines beeped with indifferent precision, and guilt flooded her had she asked too much of him. She took his hand, surprised by its lightness. "You're not alone," she whispered. "You were never alone." Daniel surfaced hours later, throat sore, to find Julia asleep in the visitor chair, her laptop open to an unfinished presentation titled "Beyond Profit, Investing in Human Potential." The sight rearranged something inside him. As a nurse adjusted his Daniel cleared his throat. "Can you ask her for what?" he rasped. Julia jolted awake, relief washing through her features. They spoke quietly. "I'm sorry," Daniel murmured. "I doubted." Julia shook her head. "No apologies. Just get well. The kitchen misses you." He managed a crooked smile. "We've got chili to serve." Recovery stretched into weeks. Julia visited daily, reading news articles, sharing photos of the kitchen team holding signs that said, "Come back soon." Daniel listened, heart swelling. One afternoon she arrived with paperwork. "Marisol and I nominated you for a city housing voucher. It's not a guarantee, but you're on the priority list." Daniel's eyes filled. "Why would you keep doing this?" Julia leaned forward. "Because returning that wallet reminded me the world is stitched together by small, brave acts. You showed me that. It's my turn to do the same." By midsummer, Daniel stepped into a modest studio, apartment linoleum floors, chipped windowsill harboring a single potted fern Julia had insisted on buying. The silence felt different than the bridges. It was soft, expectant, offering space rather than swallowing it. He set down his duffel, touched the key in his palm, and wept openly for the first time since he'd lost everything, tears soaking the fern's leaves like unexpected rain. In September, Julia presented her Beyond Profit initiative to Hightower's leadership, combining traditional investment strategies with community reinvestment funds targeting affordable housing. She cited case studies, but what moved the room were her closing words. "Our returns aren't measured solely in percentages. They're visible in every life we touch." She carried onto the stage a framed photo. Daniel ladling soup beside Marisol. The board approved a pilot program. Weeks later, at Riverside Community Kitchen's annual harvest dinner, Daniel stood before 100 guest donors, volunteers, clients, and shared his story. His voice, once tentative, resonated with quiet authority. "I returned a wallet," he said. "But what came back to me was a reminder that dignity is never truly lost. Sometimes it just needs a witness." In the front row, Julia wiped a tear, and Daniel's gaze fixed on her. "She saw me," he continued, "and because she did, I began to see myself again." Applause filled the hall, rolling like surf against shoreline. Outside, autumn painted the sky in streaks of copper. Daniel and Julia stood on the steps, cool breeze tugging at coat hems. "Feels like the beginning, doesn't it?" Julia said. Daniel looked toward the distant bridge, barely visible in twilight. "It is," he agreed, "for both of us." They walked toward the subway entrance side by Cedino rescuer and rescued, just two people carrying each other forward. Years later, a plaque at the community kitchen would bear their names, commemorating the program that had since housed hundreds. Visitors often asked about its origin, and volunteers would point to the inscription, "Integrity, kindness, second chances." The lesson lived not in polished speeches but in the quiet, everyday choices, like a man who could have kept a wallet but chose instead to return it, setting off a ripple that kept widening long after anyone remembered the shape of the wallet itself. And so the city kept humming, traffic rattling overhead, billboards changing, soup recipes rotating, but somewhere beneath the noise lingered the harmonious echo of two lives intersecting in a moment of simple honesty, proving that when compassion meets courage, everything can indeed change.